Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be here. My name is Christine Hill. I see on my badge I come from Edinburgh. Well, I don't actually. I come from a town 40 miles south of Edinburgh called Selkirk. So St John's, Selkirk is the church that I go to. We're in the Scottish borders. And now think in terms of a small town with a population of about 6,000. It's a town with a great long history. It's known as the Royal Borough of Selkirk. And it's the place where Walter Scott used to hold his courts all those years ago. It's a town which has textiles as one of its older industries. Now, if you came along to St John's Scottish Episcopal Church, there are a few things that I could guarantee. I could guarantee you a very warm welcome for a start. And I could also guarantee that you would be quite familiar with the liturgy of our church. But I could also guarantee you an element of surprise, because along with your service booklet, you would be given a pew leaflet. And on that pew leaflet it says St John's is a collaborative ministry church. And after a while you might begin to think, well, actually, who is in charge here? Because actually the chances are that you come on a day when there's not a dog collar in sight. Because the leadership of our church is the responsibility of 7 people. Now, there's nothing at all magical about that number 7, but we are all very pleased to be here, and here we are. We call ourselves the Ministry Leadership Team, or the MLT for short. Note I said leadership. We are certainly not the doers of everything. Okay, you visited us on a Sunday morning, and on Sunday mornings we function very loosely within teams. We actually have 6 preachers, 4 of whom are on the MLT. We have 6 Eucharistic ministers authorised to administer reserved sacrament, and we have 1 ordained retired priest. And we are soon to have another retired clergy person who will be joining this particular group. But that person will not automatically become a member of the MLT. We have 10 people who help to lead the worship each Sunday. We have 10 people who lead intercessions. We have lots and lots of readers and welcomers, and we have a small team of servers. We also have an entirely lay-led healing team who offer prayers for healing at our monthly Healing Eucharist. And as in any church, there are those wonderful people, the folk that I call the background people, who keep the machinery running through their own service that is a bit less public. You know, they give the hospitality via refreshments after the service. There's the team of sacristans who get things ready. They're the people who tidy the grounds, etc., etc. And you will have these kinds of folk too. But I would hope that from your first visit to St John's that you would pick up something of the ethos of our church. That in our worship together and chatting to us afterwards, you would pick up something of the ownership that members feel and their responsibility for being part of God's family in this particular part of the world. And that you would detect something of the sincerity of our faith, our care and our joy and our enthusiasm, all these things that we share as we journey together. But obviously this is just a wee taste of Sunday mornings, and what happens when we leave church is equally important too.
My name's Margaret, and I'm also one of our MLT, our leadership team members. So how did we get here? How did St John's, in this tiny wee, what you would probably call a village, but we like to call a town, how did we get to this point that Christine was telling you about? Well, our story goes back a long way. But let me start in the mid-90s, when St John's undertook a study course called Mission 21, Making Your Church More Inviting. And as we evaluated our strengths and our weaknesses, we found that our sense of identity as a community was becoming stronger despite our falling membership at that time. And because in the Scottish Episcopal Church, each congregation is responsible for paying its own clergy, we were very much aware of the realisation that our days of funding a full-time rector were coming to an end. So, what to do? Well, now let's jump ahead to 2004. 2 years before our rector at that time was due to retire, we set up a working party to investigate different models of ministry and church organisation. This working party visited many churches, near and far, we also invited people to come to our worship and to share their experiences with us. We studied articles and books on patterns of ministry. We met with our bishop. And after all of that took a long time, we recommended to our vestry is the Scottish equivalent of the PCC, we recommended to our vestry that it makes the bold decision to use our remaining funds to appoint our next full-time priest, with the specific task of leading us into a self-sustaining model of ministry that wouldn't be dependent on paid clergy. Oh, and we were going to give this person 4 years to do it in. So, we now jump to 2007, when we appointed David Skeets as our priest in charge to this task. And he began by helping our vestry to identify the ministries our church needed and to set up a process through which the congregation could identify its leaders. Now that little phrase was vital, a process through which the congregation could identify its leaders. And so our first ministry leadership team, called because it would lead and enable ministry of all the members of the church, was formed in 2008, while David was still our priest. And over the next 3 years, leadership came to be seen as a team responsibility. And when David retired in 2011, the MLT was ready collaboratively to undertake most of the work that had traditionally been thought of as the minister's work or the rector's work. Our vestry agreed that each team would serve for 5 years, and that during the 5th year the congregation should once again call out its leaders for the next team. Our calling out process is built around confidentiality. There's no stipulation of, for instance, having to take a year off if you've been called to the first team. But of course, any person called by the congregation to be a leader is given time to prayerfully consider this calling and obviously to say no if it's not right at that time for them individually. So we're now 2.5 years into our second 5-year ML team appointment. And Marnus will tell you a bit more about it.
Okay, I'm Marnet and I'm also a member of the MLT. So, how we do it? How does it work? What does it look like? In some ways, it looks and feels like it did before, when we had a priest in charge. That's not to say there have not been big changes, but the changes we have introduced to the services starting with a greater variety of liturgical content, for example, a monthly family communion from around 2007-8, have been introduced gradually and with consensus, so the transition has been smooth. Where before the priest took the whole service each week with limited input from lay members, now we have teams of worship leaders, preachers, welcomers, and lay people taking communion with reserved sacrament, and so on. And we have a full revision of all our liturgies, which serves to accommodate all this and to meet the needs of the season or given situation. Different people are up front each week, and our former priest, who is a member of our ministry leadership team, takes his part when it is his turn, alongside all of the rest of us. At other times he sits in the congregation, in mufti, so to speak. Christine has mentioned just how many of the congregation are involved with the services, as I have. If you add in all the other functions, you will find that, apart from the very elderly and the very young, just about everyone does something. And of course, training and help have been on hand when needed to facilitate matters. And as a consequence, there is a real and potent sense of ownership. New people coming to St. John's comment on the quality of the welcome. And I think that in some way this is because the processes we use are open and inclusive, and we also enjoy each other's company. The MLT, working as a sort of corporate enabler, discusses issues as they arise between ourselves by email usually, and we meet monthly. And the process is surprisingly harmonious. Of course, when it came to funerals, some people wondered how that would work, but as before, a call was issued to any in the congregation who might feel drawn to do this. A team was set up and training was given. We are now at the stage where our funeral team is entirely accepted. Locally, we collaborate with the other denominations of our small town, such as engaging in special services at Easter, Christmas, etc. We maintain links with Episcopal churches in neighbouring towns. We have a presence, of course, at our diocesan area councils and synod, all as you might expect. We have a heavy engagement in mission and with issues of social justice and well-being. Locally, members work in a variety of ways with those in need, very many of whom are out with the church or of any church. St. John's has been the driving force behind Fresh Start, for example, an organisation which collects and puts together starter packs for those who have been homeless and are being rehoused, in collaboration with our local council and other partner agencies. 1,400 packs have been given out since its inauguration in 2009. We support those further afield too through Fair Trade, Blythwood boxes, 33 sent off earlier this month, and Christian Aid, for example, and through regularly bringing relevant issues to the attention of the congregation. So, what's not to like?
Hello, my name's Heather and I'm a member of said team. I've entitled what I'm going to say Finding the Right Shape. Early in 2008, our leadership team was in place with our rector as one of the members, and as has been said, we saw ourselves as replacing an individual rector with a corporate structure with a corporate enabling of every member of St. John's. we shared out aspects of the rector's role amongst members of the team, expressing our own preferences, but also recommending others for different roles. We settled on this: a structure of worship and teaching, pastoral care and spirituality, mission and community. That was our organising structure, with 2 team members responsible for each area, although the whole team contributed to the discussion of how each might develop. Mission was always up there, and one of our key aims was to encourage everyone to share the good news of the gospel amongst friends and neighbours, work colleagues and the local community. Practical involvement in meeting the needs of others in our community and in the wider world was also a priority, as you've heard. The people of St John's have always stayed outward-looking. There were obvious concerns as David's retirement loomed in 2011. How can a team be a spiritual leader? Who will set the vision for the church? Who will bury me? But by our away day in 2010, the congregation themselves were setting goals about increasing outreach to the elderly, providing more bereavement care, taking some worship outside the church, and having a church website. By 2012, the team was well established and accepted, but the original structure of responsibilities was creaking, and the diocese was urging every church to put their vision for the future on paper. And after much discussion, the leadership team drew up a 5-year mission plan, which is organised broadly, you'll never guess, around the 5 marks of mission, or 6. To develop the ways in which we proclaim the good news of God's reign, to help our church family to grow in spiritual maturity, to build on our current work for justice and well-being in the world, to ensure that our response to pastoral needs is as effective as possible, to develop our commitment to sustaining God's creation and respecting the environment. And we added an extra: to offer an example of good practice in collaborative ministry to others. Our plan is prefaced by the statement: our vision for St John's is to be a collaborative Christian community with a culture of service, growing in faith and proclaiming the good news of God's reign. But it also comes with a proviso. This document is written with the understanding that we intend to be alert to all opportunities, including unexpected ones, and continue to be open to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. There was quite vigorous discussion about 5-year plans and how much they might limit you. We are now increasingly shaped by our mission plan. It has been presented to and accepted by the vestry and the church as a whole at our AGM. The report from the leadership team at the AGM is now a report on our progress with the mission plan. It's increasingly shaping the leadership team agenda as we now review our progress with one mission task at each monthly meeting. And we have, at long last, learnt to put it near the top of the agenda. We use it both to record relevant decisions or actions taken and to remind ourselves of what we intended to do. It's a public document on our website, but it's not written in stone. Sometimes, in discussing what we've not done, we find that it is no longer relevant and something else needs to take its place. But we have brought along some copies of the mission plan if you would like to see it.
And we discovered over the 5 or more years, mainly that it was hard work. Because the many tasks that used to be the rector's are now ours. And we have no rector as a backup or long stop. But of course, along with responsibilities come joys. We are brought together in sharing work, and we share our successes. We have become more aware of each other's gifts. That's within the church, not just the leadership team. The gifts. And sometimes we have seen members of the church discover for themselves their gifts by themselves. And sometimes the Holy Spirit can be heard prompting them directly. One who comes up to you at the end of the service, he says, "Do you think I could be a worship leader?" And not least, we are growing. In my opinion, the greatest influence in bringing the growth about is that person on the rota who is described as welcomer. The most important time that a newcomer experiences the church and appreciates it is in their first 15 seconds after they come in. That's the time when we have to persuade them it's worth listening, it's worth carrying on, coming back. So we make a great effort to make new people and visitors at home immediately. And I would like to share with you finally one thing that has become very important to us. We don't regard ourselves as doing anything new or unusual. We did at the beginning, of course, because everybody was watching to see how it would go, as we were. But now, what we do and how we do it is not new, it's not unusual. We've been doing it for years. Being collaborative is simply the way St. John's does things.